Thank you for joining us today at the Project Management Institute's Sustainability Summit 2023. We hope you enjoyed that session, and we will now have a short break.
I've been a hiker for years. I actually started hiking in the mountains of California when I was about 13, and I still do that today. I hiked Kilimanjaro in 2019, and I'm also going to do this year the Tour de Mont Blanc around the Mont Blanc Massif in Europe. And one of the sad truths we've seen, even in Europe and around the world, is the loss of our natural wonders, the glaciers. In fact, last year I started to hike the Tour de Mont Blanc, but we had to stop partway because the Italian glaciers were melting so fast, 2 hikers were killed through ice falls.
Hi, I'm Esther Gordon-Smith. I'm from the PMI UK Sustainability Community of Action. I'm one of the volunteers, and I'm going to talk to you today about the Saltwich scenarios. So why have I created this town called Saltwich, which is completely fictional? It does not exist. It's not a town where I've just changed the name. It really, really does not exist. The reason I've done this is because quite often when I talk to people about projects and sustainability, they'll say, oh, well, I can't really speak for my organisation. Or they'll say, well, that just wouldn't work where I am for this reason. So I thought, why not create a fictional town where we can make up whatever scenarios we like, and hopefully that will help us into some more imaginative and creative problem solving. So let's go back to Neolithic Saltwich. The environment's fairly good. There's plenty of energy in terms of the technology of the time, aka firewood, but let's not romanticise the past. There's definitely recognisable civilization, and the life for the everyday person, especially if they've got over the age of 5, is probably okay, but it's nothing like the quality of life today. As we move into the Iron Age, the forests have gone, and quality of life probably starts to take a bit of a dip. In terms of the economy, there's recognisable trade and a bartering economy, but food production is in its very early stages, so it has very low yields. Sometimes there's plenty of food and sometimes there's famine. As we go into the Roman era, there are recognisable cities, and there's been a big change in infrastructure in terms of roads and canals. In terms of economy and finance, we've got recognisable international law and trade arrangements. In terms of human health, if you're rich, it's not too bad, but the Roman economy is built on slaves. There's no gender equality at all, and we've got waves of some peace and prosperity, some disease and violence. As we head into the Saxon period, settlements and infrastructure have been knocked back for a while with the collapse of the Roman Empire, and pressure is starting to rise on food and water and other resources, which is really typified by the Vikings coming over because of acute pressure for agricultural land in Scandinavia and the breakdown of their food system. And so again, you have periods of peace and violence, and different international partnerships, and also periods of stability. By the time the Normans have come over, which maybe hasn't made a huge difference to the common person, as essentially the feudal overlords have changed, there are acute pressures on land and food production due to the inefficiencies of strip farming and some of the problems with a feudal hierarchy. We're in an era of road building and castle building, and the population is rising, so it's now around 3 million, which is double the population from Roman Britain. In the 1400s, into the time of the Plantagenets, a huge change has happened and the Black Death has come through, which kills around 40% of the population. And so settlements some of them have collapsed completely. In some ways, the food system has collapsed in that there's not enough labour to work the fields, but where there is food being produced now, enough to go around. And workers are starting to be able to negotiate in terms of ending serfdom. There are also new economic opportunities around wool exports, and the monasteries are flourishing, providing some services for the poor and education. The population's back down to about 2.5 million from a pre-plague high of around 5 million. As we head into the Tudors, post-Reformation, We're also post the discovery of the Americas, and there's been big changes to the economy and finance system, and we're now in a mercantile economy. There's been a huge influx of silver and strong international trade. The monasteries are gone, but we do start to see poor laws and parish taxes to nominally support the poor, but you can also be punished for being poor. In the Stuart era, agriculture is really starting to take off, and we're now producing double the amount of food than was produced in the Tudor era, but also starting to see more use of natural resources with things like more efficient mill technology. The population is now back up to its roughly pre-plague figure of 5 million. We've got periods of civil war, but also increasing access to education and justice for some. In the Hanoverian period, food production has risen by another 50%, and the population has also started to increase dramatically, but this means that there's very little resilience to famine caused by climate or other crop failures, and disease is widespread, especially in areas with poor sanitation and overcrowding. Roads and canals are being built, and so Saltwich has a recognisable transport and canal network. Into the Victorian era, the population has exploded from around 5 million in 1650 to 8 million in 1800 to 17 million in 1850 to 27 million in 1890. Some of the rivers are so polluted they are reported to have caught fire, and waterborne disease kills hundreds of thousands of people. But some laws have come in around things like child labour and the rights of women. Wealth inequality is accelerating. The railway line has come in, and we're well into fossil fuel use through coal and heading into oil and gas, and we can clearly see the foundations of the modern capitalist economy. Into the 1950s, post-war Britain is a long way from its planetary boundaries. The population is still rising to around 40 million, and lots of land has been put to the plough in World War II with increasing use of fertilisers and pesticides. There are also many sources of pollution. But it's also around the time of the NHS, universal education, universal suffrage, and entering into a recognisable modern quality of life. And so as we transfer into the modern day, we are a long way from our planetary boundaries, but are also experiencing the best standards of living ever experienced. There have been huge advances in technology and infrastructure, though there are increasing questions about how long this will continue. Population estimates are being revised down. We're in a cost of living crisis and an energy crisis, and also a climate crisis and a biodiversity crisis. And so to conclude, at the end of my 7 minutes, what is this about? Saltwich is a place where hopefully we can imagine the interactions between different systems, and we can pull them apart and have a look at them. So we can have a look at human settlements as a system, or food and water as a system, without the constraints of the real world that we find ourselves in. Hopefully this will lead us to be creative and imaginative in problem solving. And whilst we look at sustainability and we look at these systems, hopefully we can collaborate towards finding some solutions. Thanks very much.
Creating a more sustainable future is the challenge of the century. Together we can engage, inspire and mobilise for action to improve the situation for people and the planet. How? Through the power of projects. Project management brings together the why, the what and the how. Let's come together to use our skills for action. Please get ready because the next session is about to start.